This is Anna Hamilton with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program at the University of Florida. Today is Friday, April 11th, 2025 at just about 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Pensacola Beach at Park West.
Park West.
With Rick O'Connor, who is here today to talk to us about what he does and about kind of the state of the environment here in Pensacola for the Pensacola Environmental Oral History Project. So with that, will you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Rick O'Connor, and I am with the Florida Sea Grant Program, which is part of the UF IFAS Extension Program, scattered across the state of Florida. We have agents in both, Gulf Coast and the Atlantic Coast. I'm based in Escambia County, Pensacola, which happens to be my hometown. That worked out really well for me. And so my job here is to work with the local industries that have connections to the marine environment. It could be hotel owners, people who are on the beach. It could be fishermen. It could be, I work with habitat restoration folks. I work with a lot of different, what we call them stakeholders, that have a stakeholder or an interest in the marine environment here. And my job as a Sea Grant agent is to provide them science-based information, which we have Sea Grant has a series of researchers, specialists as we call them, that are conducting research both in Gainesville and in other parts of the state to provide that information to help them get through problems if they've got different problems, issues, enhance their business, whatever the topic might be. So that's what I do.
Nice, thank you. And I'll come back to that, but I do know that you are a lifelong Pensacolian.
Yes, there's a few of us actually. It's a Navy town, so everybody's from somewhere else.
Tell us about how you and your family came to live here in Pensacola.
My mother is Navy. Interesting. This is a Navy town. Her father was a naval photographer. He actually was killed in World War II. But his job was to fly in the nose of the airplane and photograph during the sequences of both training and battle, combat, and non-combat. But the photography school is here at NAS Pensacola. My mom was actually born in San Diego because Navy people travel everywhere. She was born in San Diego, but she came back here. Her mother, her family goes way back. One of the first postmaster generals in town was a relative of her. The family name is Crook, which is funny when you tell people I'm a crook. I said, really? But he actually delivered mail from here to New Orleans. That was kind of his route, if you want to call it back then. That was all horse and stuff. So her family goes way back. And we actually had a family reunion one year with that group, and it was kind of like today we had a bunch of school kids. It was just like that. Everybody had different colored shirts. There were hundreds of people. We didn't realize we even were related. So that side of the family goes way back. My father, my grandfather, and all of the Irish moved over here. Grandpa John moved over here from Ireland into New England, and at that time, a lot of the Irish weren't economically doing well. So during World War II, the thing was to go to Detroit. Detroit was where they were building jeeps, tanks, all this other kind of stuff. So he went to Detroit. He was actually, they called him a bookkeeper, but basically an accountant. And then my grandmother on my father's side moved to a place just a little west of here called Alberta, Alabama. It's a whole community of Germans that were fleeing Germany because of Adolf Hitler. They saw what was happening. They didn't like what was going on. They moved from Germany to Austria, said he won't come here. He came to Austria. They said, well, he won't go to the United States. So they moved over here to southern Alabama, of all places. How did you pick Alberta, Alabama? But that's where they ended up. And when they got here, the same deal. They ended up moving folks up north to work in the factories in Detroit to make money to come back to run the farm. Because it was basically grab your stuff and go is kind of how it went. And so my German grandmother met my Irish grandfather, got married, and when the war was over, he came down to run the books and that's how we ended up in this area. So my mom came by Navy, my dad came through a roundabout way. He was actually born in Detroit and then came back down here. So this is where we settled. And I was born here.
Did you know your grandparents?
Yes. Oh, yes. And my great-grandparents. Yes. Actually, it was funny. I took German in high school. And when I went over to Alberta, my dad was kind of pushing me a little bit. He goes, go speak to your great-grandmother, go do it. And I went, So I went over and I started talking to her, and she just had this weird look on her face. I said, am I doing this wrong? She goes, no, you're saying it like so perfect. No one speaks like that, So I did get to meet them before they passed on. It was fun.
Did you, imagine maybe you have some unique family traditions that come from those two different lines. Is that the case?
We did. Actually, it was, a lot of the family traditions were more on the Irish side, honestly. They're very family oriented. We'd all get together for Thanksgiving. And if you know Thanksgiving, the Detroit Lions always play. And so, the O'Connors were from Detroit. And we expect them to lose. One year they actually won, and everybody was disappointed. It was like the worst Thanksgiving ever. Like, wow, and of course the Lions are good now, so we're totally messed up. But yeah, that was a big family tradition, was to get together at Thanksgiving and watch the Lions lose. That was a big part of our family, yeah. And we got a lot of others, again, we do obviously St. Patrick's, that's a holiday for us, we take off. So it's fun, yeah.
Do you have photos still that you said your father took?
Yes, we have some, and most of them were of Pensacola, not during the war or anything, but he would fly over practicing, and I got some pictures of the neighborhood that I live in now, which is interesting to see what it looked like then. One of the things that caught my attention was how much dirt there was. A lot of it was dirt. There wasn't lawn or grass or anything. It was a lot of dirt, and I asked about that, and they said back in those days, people were afraid of snakes, and so they would sweep the grass so that the grass would not grow because grass encouraged snakes. I went, oh. So yeah, when you look at pictures of Pensacola in the 1930s, it looks like a dirt field. It's interesting, but they told me that's why.
That is so interesting.
Yeah, weird. Yeah, I hated snakes.
And what neighborhood did you grow up in here?
I grew up in a neighborhood called Scenic Heights, which in the 1960s was way out of town. It was like out in the boondocks. Today it's incorporated in the city of Pensacola, like any other. Gainesville, the same thing. It's all spread out all over the place. But I'll take that back. Initially when I was born, my father had a gas station just across the bridge. Alberta's in Alabama, and again, Pensacola's basically right there. But just across the bridge in Florida, he had a gas station, and I remember we grew up there, and then we moved to a community called Navy Point, which is right at the gate of NAS Pensacola, where a lot of Navy families lived. And so we lived there when I was small, and then we moved to this new development on the outside of town called Scenic Heights. There was actually a farm behind our house that had horses and things like that, which is interesting for folks who, if they're watching this now and live in Scenic Heights now, like, you're kidding me, there were farms out here and horses. I'm like, yeah, back then there was. But now it's just a suburban neighborhood. All of that's gone.
What was it like to grow up on base or to spend time
near base? I was very little at that time. So I do remember very little. I remember very little. What I do remember was kite flying was very big back in those days. And everybody was flying kites, and my dad brought home a box kite, if you know what those things are. They're square, they're like rectangles. And I was so disappointed because everybody else had these cool diamond-shaped and I had this boxy thing. But it ended up being the cool kid on the block because I had a box kite. So I remember that. But we moved, I guess I was about 4 or 5 years old when we moved. But it was right about that time. Well, the other thing I remember from that period was John F. Kennedy being shot. I remember that. I didn't know what was going on. I was a little kid. I remember my mom was crying. What happened? The president was shot. I went, that's terrible. Can I go out and play? Kind of thing. I was just a little kid. So, but that's about all I really remember of that. I was too young to remember more.
And how about your formative years? What was it like growing up in Scenic Heights?
Scenic Heights, what I know now, because I ended up studying biology in school, I lived on what would be called a sandhill. I did not know it then. It was an open area, a sandy area, kind of like this. It had turkey oak. We had gopher tortoises. I did find rattlesnakes. We could catch we called them horned toads, but the horned lizards. I could probably catch 40 or 50 a day. And so we had a blast catching those. I remember getting a dead rattlesnake one time and thought this would be a lot of fun to put it in the mailbox and scare the mailman. And that backfired. I won't go too far. The mailman did open it. He saw, he yelled, he went to the house. I was hiding in the bushes with my friends. And he went up to the front door to knock on the door to tell my dad. And I'm thinking, like, that's not part of the plan. You're not supposed to do that. Yeah, that didn't end up well. It was a great idea until then. But yeah, there was a lot of wildlife around. It really was. We were in the middle. We had, like I said, we had horses in the background, but it was one of those things, and a lot of people who grew up in my generation will say the same thing. You wake up in the morning, basically they kick you out the door and come back when the street lights are on. They had no idea where we were. They had no idea what we were doing. We played capture the flag. There was an old dairy, abandoned dairy near us. And so that was like the fort, and you had to take over the fort. And we just played until sunset, and at sunset we came in. That's kind of how it was. I remember my mom and dad, we didn't have a lot of money when I was young. I remember them providing me, we drank milk, it was dried milk. You might remember the dried milk. And if you don't know what that is, it was powder. You would pour it in the pitcher and pour water on it and stir it, and that was your milk. It was horrible. But I mean, at the time growing up, I thought that's what milk was. They did make a mistake one time, and they bought me real milk. And I drank it and went, oh, so this is milk. Oh, okay, this is great. And they tried to push that back on us because, again, they're trying to save money. I went, no, you've lost that. I want the real stuff. So, and that was the astronaut days, in the early 60s. Everybody wanted to be an astronaut. So Tang was big. Everybody drank Tang because I wanted to be him. I wanted to be that guy. And that was actually a dream of mine. Everybody wanted to be a pilot. The Blue Angels are based here. So as a kid, you always wanted to either be a Blue Angel pilot or an astronaut. That was the kind of thing. Yeah.
And so how did you come into your field of study?
My field of study was out here. I grew up on this beach. We would rent a house down close to where we were working earlier today on invasive plants. And my dad, I can't remember how old I was, but my dad bought me a mask and snorkel, and that was it. I was hooked. I loved it. I loved being underwater more than being above water. I would watch a show every Sunday night called The Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau. I want to be that guy. I found out he's French, and I can't be that guy because I'm an American, so it didn't work out. But I did all kind of started going in that direction. I really wanted to do this, and I didn't care how much I got paid. I just would love to have a job where I got to work in the marine environment. And so I did it.
Do you remember your first snorkel trip?
I do. We were in what we called the drop-off, and it was probably 10 feet deep, It was just a little ledge to drop up, but as a kid, it was like the deep ocean, It was all scary and monsters down on the bottom kind of thing. And we had a little dinghy, a Boston Whaler dinghy that we would flip upside down. And so if you needed a breath of air, you'd come up and get your little breath. It was like a diving bell kind of thing. And the whole thing was like 10 feet deep. But yeah, that was my first time in there. But I remember going under and seeing the fish and hearing the fish. And it was so quiet. That was the thing. It was quiet except for the marine. You would come up and you would hear boats and everything else, and then you go back underwater like, this is a cool place. I really like it down here.
What did it sound like?
Baking frying. They have these snapping, cracking noises that you would hear. The fish are all making kinds of noises. The grunts, you could hear them making noises. But most of what you would hear is what I would call bacon frying. Shrimp. There were snapping shrimp making sounds, things like that. They were all in the rock jetties. And it was kind of neat. I didn't know what I was hearing or what I was listening to, but I just thought it was fantastic and it was quiet and it was just a great place to be. It really was.
And what kind of fish and creatures did you see?
Mainly pinfish where I was early on. That was mainly it. But then as I got older and spent more time in the jetties, we would see all kinds of tropical damselfish, different eels, belted sand bass. All these little sea bass things and flounder, we'd find those. Occasionally sharks, not many, but we did see them. Blue crab, that was always fun to try to catch some of those things, but that's kind of was the focus of it, was those.
Did that translate into a love of fishing?
It did. My dad was not a fisherman or a hunter, so we never grew up really doing. He took us fishing some, and I think he did it because he thought, well, we live here, you need to fish. He was from Detroit, so I guess we need to go fishing. But we really never did it a lot. I got into spear fishing, though. I didn't do a lot of rod and reel, but with my love of going underwater, I did do a lot of spear fishing when I was younger. But it was I would more describe myself as a fish watcher. Kind of people go out to look at birds, I go underwater to look at fish. And now I will say that was one of my favorite things about fishing was what was going to be on the hook this time. I was always intrigued, is there going to be something different? And see all the different weird fish that live down there. So I enjoyed that part, but I didn't spend a lot of time fishing.
And did your family eat a lot of seafood? Or?
We did. Again, it was really strange. You're growing up here in Pensacola, yes, we ate seafood, but seafood was something, unless you were an avid fisherman and you got your own, it was something you didn't buy that frequently. It was like, on Thursday night or Sunday night, we would have a seafood meal where people eat shrimp every day of the week now. We didn't really do a lot of that. Now, again, some local families did. But I didn't. We had a lot of, again, we're Irish, a lot of potatoes. Dad fried a lot of things. And so, we'd have what I would call classic Southern meals, a lot of mashed potatoes, a lot of fried chicken, things like that was a big part of our diet growing up.
Understood.
Yeah.
And tell me about kind of your school career and how did you start studying marine sciences?
Yeah, well, again, I had the interest as a snorkeler. I remember being in middle school, and my 7th grade teacher, which was life science, was a spear fisherman, and he brought in a barracuda one day to show it off. I was hooked. That was another thing. I said, okay, yeah, this is definitely what I want to do. And then I went to high school and knew I was going to study marine biology. That was on my brain. And we had a marine biology course, and there was a marine biology club. And I became the president of the marine biology club, which was a lot of fun because for homecoming, everybody had to do floats. So the marine biology club did floats, but most of the floats were like, kill the tigers, whatever it was. Ours was like save the diatoms. It was some kind of off the wall marine biology thing. We never won. People would go by like, what is a diatom? What are you talking about? Like, it's a good idea. But we would come out here and do restoration projects. We would do that out here on the beach. My best friend, a surf buddy of mine, he was the treasurer. We used to do fundraisers to go to Crystal River to see manatees. We never got to go because every time I asked for a treasury report, there was no money. Because so what happened to all the money? Long story short, he was buying surfboards and stuff, Mike, yeah. Embezzling was happening even back then, it was happening. So yeah, I got into that. That's where I took German because I went to my guidance counselor and said, well, I'm interested in science. And she said, well, the language of science is German. Which, of course, she's thinking, I know, I thought that was kind of, not then, but now, like, why did she say that? Well, it was during the rocket days, And so she just connected science with rockets and going to the moon. And so, you need to take German, which I did, and it was fun, but I never got to use it. I don't even remember most of it now. You don't speak it very often. And so then I decided to go on to college. My first choice was the University of Miami. That was just in your brain. They got a big marine biology program. My father saw tuition. He goes, what's your second choice? I said, I don't know. I don't have a second choice. He goes, well, you better find one because you're not going there. I went, okay. So I started looking around for another school. I had thought about Gainesville, I'll be honest with you. I went to campus to visit the place. It was a homecoming weekend or something. I said, I will never graduate from this school. There is way too much going on. Let me go somewhere, get my feet wet, and I'll come back. And so then I went to a college fair, and there was a sign up that said Troy State. I went, that's a weird name for a school. So I went over and talked to them and told them what I was interested in and said, he said, we're near Montgomery. And I said, well, I want to do marine science. He goes, well, we've got that. I went, in Montgomery, Alabama. He goes, oh, you won't go here. You'll go to Dauphin Island Sea Lab. I went, oh. So I enrolled in Troy, did some of the courses up there, but went to Dauphin Island Sea Lab, which absolutely loved. It was a great place. You're in a place just like this. This is where we had class every day. Most of the classes had 6 to 15 people in a classroom. Boat day, every Wednesday was boat day. We got on a research ship and took off and just, fell more in love. Now, what was interesting at that time, in the early 70s, Jaws came out. So, of course, everybody saw Jaws, and everybody wanted to do sharks. Everybody. I wanted to be Jacques Cousteau, a French-speaking shark scientist. That's what I wanted to do. And right when that was happening, before I graduated from high school, they filmed Jaws 2 here. This is where they filmed it. It was actually, the base was in Navarre, but they filmed it here in Pensacola, a little bit in Mobile, some in Fort Walton. So we came out and watched them actually video or do the movie. It was wild to see that. So, sharks were on the brink. I was actually out there, if you remember in Jaws 2, there's a scene where the kids are on Hobie Cats and they're stuck out there in the water and the helicopter lands and the guy gets out with a little bullhorn, are you okay? And the shark comes up and eats him. I was there that day. It was right out here in the Gulf. They had put the shark on a launch and they were firing it off this launch and they kept missing the helicopter, and they would cut, and they would put it back, and I'm sitting here watching all this, and I didn't realize it, but standing right next to me, 2 things happened right then. The guy standing next to me was Roy Schreider. I didn't realize I was him, and he jumped on this thing I'd never seen before called a jet ski, and it was really wild. We had never seen a jet ski, but that's how they got back and forth to the set, was on jet skis. So that just drove sharks more into my brain. But when I got to Dauphin Island, and started messing around there with classes, I absolutely fell in love with the estuaries. So my whole focus turned from open ocean shark stuff to the estuaries, which is where I've spent most of my career, is in the estuaries. So
What about the estuaries? What changed that for you?
It was the variety. I think that was really it. I mean, you know, when we're pulling nets and anything, we just got so many different kinds of things. We would pull, we had, you know, on the research vessel, we would pull otter trawls, shrimp nets and things like that, and we'd find all these cool things that would come up off the bottom, pulled seine nets. Snorkeling over there, in Alabama, the water quality is, not quality, but the clarity is much lower. And so snorkeling is not that great over there. So we had to rely on other things. But I was just intrigued by all the variety of different fish that live in the bay. And just got interested in that. And then I got into, I'll tell you another piece of it. Here, you asked about what fish I saw a lot. Pinfish are abundant in this place. There's nowhere you can go, pull a net, throw a rod in the water. You're going to catch them. I mean, they're all over the place. I got to Mobile, and they hardly have them. And that just resonated with me. So I got into what they call biogeography. What is the distribution of animals within the bays? How does Pensacola Bay compare to Mobile Bay? And why are the fish that we find here not found there? And that kind of moved me towards graduate school. My interest in graduate school was in biogeography of fishes, yeah.
I mean, I have to ask, why don't the pinfish live in Mobile Bay?
I didn't do a research study on it. It just led me into that career. My hunch, the salinity is much lower there. Here in our bay, inside the bay, we'll find it in the upper 20s usually. The Gulf of Mexico is 35. You get over there in Mobile Bay at low tide sometimes, especially after rain. I've seen as low as 3. You know, so they just couldn't tolerate. I guess maybe they couldn't cross to the other side because as you go further down the coast, you'll find them again. But there's just this little pocket where they weren't existing. So that was my hunch, was salinity, was why they weren't there. They're there. They just weren't as abundant as they are here.
Understood.
Yeah.
Who were some of your mentors in school?
My high school, Marine high school teacher was a ex-National Park Ranger, Mr. Don Scott. And he was the beginning. Of course, Cousteau, watching Cousteau, I wanted to be him. But Don Scott was definitely the guy who got me really rolling. Mr. Hunt was the guy who brought in the fish that I was telling you about, that kind of guy. But as far as a mentor, Mr. Scott was my big mentor. And then when I got to undergrad school, I got to work with Dr. Herbert Beauchamp, who was an ichthyologist from the University of Alabama, and just stupid brilliant. I mean, just great guy. But he's very down to earth, you know, so I wanted to be like him. And my advisor in grad school was his roommate in college. So his name was Dr. William Clyburn. And so those were my big mentors in the industry, in the career that I was moving, that got me really going.
And what kinds of things, like how did they help you along? What kinds of things?
Well, Don Scott was, I would say in all 3 cases, mentally challenging you. Okay, instead of spoon feeding you, like, you're going to figure this out and I'm not going to help you, but I expect you to get it done. But they were always there for advice. I mean, you know, they didn't completely turn you loose, but they really expected you to kind of discover things. I remember I did have a professor, they kind of followed the same kind of thing. We did a thing at the university. I did get to go to the University of Miami later for a semester on a special program. And the first thing they did is said, all right, everybody grab their snorkel gear. We're going out of the water. First day, Biscayne Bay. All right, this is great. We're going to be in the water day 1. So we get there and he goes, all right, go snorkeling. So we put on our mask and we start swimming around and snorkeling. And we're kind of like, is there something we're supposed to do? This is a class. I'm getting a grade. He goes, snorkel. I said, okay. You know, so we're snorkeling. We're going along like, am I supposed to be looking for something? Snorkel. Okay, I'm snorkeling. You know, and finally we saw him, I don't know, we were out there 30 minutes. And after it was done, he was putting away things, putting it in the van. And like, are we done? He goes, yeah, we're finished. And I said, so how did we do? He goes, you did great. Right. And, you know, we were talking amongst each other, like, this is either going to be the easiest A I ever got in my life or the hardest, because I have no idea what's going on right now. But when we got back, he said, go shower, clean up, and meet me back in the lab. And when we got back in the lab, we were all sitting there, and the professor came in, he sat in a chair, he goes, all right, tell me what you saw out there. And we were like, you know, I saw a fish. It was good for you, you know. And everybody was like, I didn't want to be the loser, like, I saw a fish too, you know. But long story short, what we ended up doing, and he did it, and this is how going back to your question, the other professors did a lot of this too. He's just kind of let it go, and at one point, somebody made the comment, did you notice those long white snails were only on the east side of the jetty, not on the west side? And we started talking, and then the light bulb came on for us. Oh, that's what this is all. We kind of looked at him, he smiled and winked, he goes, we got a project. And so that's how my professors, my mentors, what I really got out of them, they did a lot of that kind of stuff, which was great.
Nice.
Yes, it was.
And what did you specialize in grad school?
Grad school, vertebrate zoology. I did a non-thesis track in vertebrate zoology, but as I said, my advisor was a herpetologist, so I kind of got interested in that. And after grad school, I got very interested in turtles. And working with turtles, that led me to diamondback terrapins, which is where I was spending a lot of my time before I joined Sea Grant. Was doing a lot of diamondback terrapin. And here in the Florida Panhandle, there were no peer-reviewed articles of terrapins even existing here. So that was actually, I was being asked by turtle organizations, hey, you're in the Panhandle, can you help us with this project? Question one, do you have terrapins? And so that whole project, which I now do as a citizen science project for Sea Grant, and it expands the whole Panhandle. As a matter of fact, we include Alabama, and I've already recently got contacted by Mississippi State. They were like, hey, can you bring it over there? So it's blown up. But that was kind of the area I focused on, was vertebrate zoology, and it spilled over into turtles.
And so we did some research in class before this trip, and one of the questions here that came out of that is why turtles with 3 question marks at the end?
It was something that I was invited to go to a turtle conference. And again, my focus, when I was coming out of school, and my first job, I started a marine science program for the school district here. We called it the Institute of Coastal and Marine Studies, ICAMS was the acronym. But it was a high school program. And we ended up having to change it because it sounded so good. I was getting emails about, can I do my postdoc work? I was like, so we changed it to the Marine Science Academy. It just sounded like we actually had it on our t-shirt. We look good on paper, I think is what our shirt said. But with that program, the turtle people had heard, I was invited to go to a turtle conference, and I said, all right, my focus was on fish. That's what I was doing. That's what I was doing with the students. And what that program was about, by the way, is we had a lot of high school kids that said, I want to be a marine biologist. I said, well, let's see. And so this program was, it was district-wide. I was based out of Washington High School, but anybody in the school district could come. They had to apply to get in. It's kind of like a magnet program. And so they all wanted to come into this thing, and they all thought, oh, I want to go be a scientist or a marine biologist. But their vision of it was kind of like mine. You know, I'm watching Jacques Cousteau, and here's this guy having a really cool drink with an umbrella in it on a ship, and they're singing music and going diving with these cool wetsuits that have stripes on it. Like, yeah, that's what you think we do. But then when you get into it, you realize there's a lot. Now, when you get into it, there's a lot of work. You're walking around the mud. You're getting bit by no-see-ums and mosquitoes, and you're having to measure how far the snail went up and down the grass, you know, whatever they got you working on. I was like, holy cow. But I loved it. And so when the students said, oh, I think I want to be a marine biologist, that was kind of my plan. I followed the same thing. I did the same thing that my professors did. I took them out on what we call discovery trips, and I didn't say anything. We're just going to walk. We're going to walk the beach. We're going to walk through the marsh, and something's going to click, because they had to do a senior project. And so over the next 3 years, they would kind of build up to this research project that they would end up working on. And I was invited in the midst of all of that to go to this turtle conference. I was like, all right, let's go see what the turtle thing is all about. And I did. And they heard about my program. I fell in love with turtles. My wife and I both started turtle watching. We went out and just started to see how many different species we could find. We paddle a lot. And then they said, hey, can you take on this terrapin project? We need somebody to do it. And there you go. I became the terrapin guy. So that's how it worked.
Why did that feel like an important pivot for you?
I don't know. It was the first time. We've had people who came to the Marine program and asked, like, oh, you can kind of understand this. So some of the Marine resource folks, oh, here is this high school program that can do stuff for us at little or no charge, okay? They understand they're working with high school kids, but they also understood me, that I was making them, you know, go through the rigor of doing it the correct way. And so with a lot of those, we've got the community asking us to do work, which I felt that was even as important, because what I'm doing now is you're going to be working on a research project that's not just helping you understand what science is. Do you really want to go into this? And at first, about only 20% of the students who attended the program actually did. Later on, more did, but it was not what they thought it was. But the fact that they were doing projects that meant something to someone outside of the school system. And the terrapin thing was a big deal at that time, because no one knew anything about them. This was ours, you know. We were doing seagrass projects and a lot of other things, but there was already other people doing those. We were just contributing to something else that was going on. The terrapin was ours. No one was doing this, so I kind of jumped on that one.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have to ask, growing up here and spending a lot of time outside, do you have memories of sea turtles or?
I do. We didn't see a lot of them growing up. Not that they weren't here. It's just in the places I went and the things I did, we just didn't see and encounter them. I did see sharks. We did see some of those things. A lot of stingrays, manta rays. I used to remember seeing manta rays jump up. Manatees off and on. We would see them. They occur. We are seeing a lot more now than we used to. We would see those occasionally. But not so much the sea turtle. Dolphins were all over the place. Everybody got to see dolphins, so that was something that was kind of normal, but a common. Yeah, that was more the manta ray, that kind of thing, is what I remember a lot of.
And so once you graduate, what do you do post-school?
Post-school, all right, my first thing getting out of school was to find a job, okay? Because like a lot of these other college students, I don't know about all of you guys, ate a lot of beans and rice, that kind of thing. At grad school, like, oh, you can be a TA. We pay $300 a month. Oh, whoopee, that's great. So I was really ready to start making some money doing something. And I found in this particular part of the state, job opportunities were slim to none. There just wasn't a lot here. And I applied to go in other places around the country, but being patient, it took to about 2 years, but my mother-in-law was teaching school. And she goes, have you ever thought about teaching marine science? And I kind of, after I got off the floor laughing, like, oh yeah, that'll be me in front of a bunch of students. I don't know if that's a good idea. And I said, okay, let's take a shot at it. I fell in love with teaching. I loved it, absolutely loved it. But I continued working on my career and my degree to get to where I wanted to go. But now I have kind of married those. I thought I wanted to be a researcher. I loved education. So what I really like now is what I call the citizen science thing, where you're doing research as a means of education. And that's really what I'm doing. I got several citizen science projects I do with Sea Grant now. And the primary reason we're doing it is to educate the folks that live here about their environment. If you want to learn about it, get out there and swim around. Okay, pull some beach vitex and see what it's really like, It looks easy on TV. And so my job is to educate the public about this stuff, and I find them doing research projects is one of the best ways to do it. And so it's been a very happy marriage, and that's kind of where I've spent most of my career, is right there, mixing the two.
And when did you join Sea Grant?
I joined Sea Grant in 2012. So I was a late bloomer. I had already been in the public school system. I taught I did teach classes at the local community college, Pensacola State College. I taught there. I taught at I ran the marine science program and taught there, and I taught at Dolphin Island Sea Lab. I'd go work over there in the summers. So I did work over there as well. Same kind of thing, mixing the research with the students was my job. What was the other part of the question?
Just when you joined Sea Grant?
Yeah, with Sea Grant, I had already been in all of that for about 28 years, right at 28 years before I ended up joining Florida Sea Grant. But Sea Grant is one of those jobs. I knew all the Sea Grant agents while I was doing the other ones. Sea Grant is a great job. It's a wonderful job. And when you get it, you don't walk away from it. It's just and so the Sea Grant agent had left. I was actually out here doing a turtle watch with some of our students. And one of the national park rangers said, did you hear the Sea Grant job was open? I said, man, I'm going to apply for that. But she was looking for a job too. So I said, well, you need to do it. And her response was, well, my aunt works for Extension, so I can't do that. I went, oh, okay, I'll throw my name in there. And I really didn't think they were going to hire me. I really didn't. But they asked me to come for an interview in Gainesville. I went, okay, that'll be cool, free trip to Gainesville. They put me up in the rights union. All right, this will be cool. I never dreamed, and they offered me the job. So now I'm 2 years, I was 28 years in, so you get retirement at 30 years. I'm 2 years. Do I hang in the public school system for 2 more years? This job will not be here in 2 years. So I walked. I left and I joined, and I'm glad I did. I wish I had found it sooner, but the job was taken sooner. So that was how it worked out.
Who helped prepare you for this position?
For Sea Grant? That's a great question. That is a great question. I know if anybody of the extension agents watching this, they're all laughing, right? They don't prepare you for this. You don't know what you're walking into. You really don't. You go into the office The first thing I remember, I think I may have shared this with you earlier. The first thing I remember, I went to my office director. I said, well, what are our hours? What time is work? She goes, you need to schedule time for your family. That's what she told me. I went, what does that mean? And what time does work start? What time do we go home? She goes, you need to schedule time for your family. I totally understand what she means now. In Extension, we work with the people in the community who need our information, but they are working during the day. So when they're off work is when they're reaching out, which is 6 o'clock at night, Saturdays, Sundays, but you're expected to be at the office from 8 to 4:30 every day. So your life can quickly be taken over by this job. You have to figure out how to manage that. So that was the first thing I remember. I said, all right, I have to figure out how to do this. The other thing, when you first get in there, they tell you, don't do anything. Don't start any programs. Just sit back and try to learn your community and find out what are the real critical issues in your community so that Sea Grant can provide some information that may solve some of these problems. What they knew but didn't really understand in my case is I grew up here, so I already knew what the problems were. I got an advisory meeting put together really quick, but that first couple of weeks I remember just sitting around the office and everybody else is running around and doing things, and I remember our extension director, Dr. Mike Springer, he called me and said, hey, how's it going? I said, it's going fine. I said, everything's good. He goes, you feel like you're getting paid to do nothing? He goes, yes, I need something to do. He goes, relax, it will come to you. And that's exactly what happens. Next thing you know, they're knocking on the door. The snake thing was first. You know, they start knocking on the door. Can you help us? Can you help us? You can help us, and bingo, you're off and running.
So we were talking before we started recording, but will you tell us again about the snake situation?
The snake situation, yeah. Remember again, I was in grad school with a herpetologist. I did work in his snake lab quite a bit, so I was very comfortable with snakes. I'd been around them a lot. I got into turtles, you know, I told you that. And so my first week on the job, the secretary up front buzzed my phone in the office, and she goes, Rick, you're a turtle guy, right? And I said, yeah, I'm a turtle guy. Turtle, snake, same thing, line one. I went, okay. So I pick up the phone, there was a question, I answered it, and word got around town that, oh, the extension office can help you with your snake problems. And this being a Navy town, they were all freaking out about snakes in their yard because they were from Iowa, like, what is this? So yeah, all of a sudden the phone is ringing. It's nonstop, constantly. My advisor is like, what are you doing snakes for? You're Sea Grant? Like, I don't know. They're calling. Sea Grant was saying, like, what are you doing? Like, snakes, I don't know. You know, they called. You told me to wait. I waited. Here it is. So now I'm doing snakes. So I thought, all right, let's take this show on the road. This is kind of how Extension works. I'll put together a program I called Living with Snakes, how to get along with these things, because you're not going to get rid of them. You're in Florida. Welcome to Florida. We got snakes. So the first program I did, one person came. That was it. So I thought, okay, this is going to be a bomb. This was not a good idea. So I went ahead. I had 10 programs lined up. I went to the next program. It was at a community center, and they said, well, we got 2 rooms. One that's kind of a basketball gym. It'll hold several hundred. Or do you want the room for 25? I think the 25 will be fine. So we set up in there. I was getting the coffee ready, had a sign-in sheet. And then she came in and goes, we've got to move you. She goes, the parking lot's full. I had 101 people show up. We had to go into the basketball gym, and it just blew up. And I've been doing snakes ever since. Even though I'm supposed to be working on some other things, that's kind of how the snake story got started. So,
do you remember what the question was that started all this?
I don't remember that specific question, but I would say almost 90% of them is, what kind of snake is this? Is it venomous? And so then I started a project I call Snake Watch. I do not ask anyone in this town to go out and look for snakes. We aren't going to do that. But if you see one, tell me what you're seeing. Because again, being a Navy town, we get calls. Matter of fact, I have gone to Eglin Air Force Base and a couple to speak with families. Hey, we just moved here. What do we need to know about snakes? So what that Snake Watch is, the people call me, they tell me what they're seeing, when they're seeing it, and where they're seeing it. And I log all that, and I made a program out of that, which I just call Snakes of Pensacola Bay. So here are the snakes that most people encounter. We've got rattlesnakes, but people don't encounter them very much. So here are the ones you can probably will encounter. This is a time of year that most people see them, and no, most of these are not venomous. And I just go through a little slideshow. And so that's what most of the questions are about. Most of them are about that. And then the other part of it, one of them ended up in a snake survey over on Perdido Key. They have a lot of cottonmouths on that island. And I ended up publishing a short note in Herpetological Review on it. We're having the same thing over at Cedar Key. There's an island over there, Seahorse Key, that has an abundance of cottonmouths. And it looks like, I talked to Dr. Lillywhite on campus in Gainesville about it, it looks like cottonmouths are kind of adapting to more saltwater conditions. We don't think they're drinking seawater like sea turtles do, but we're finding them more and more in these salty environments. And Perdido Key, it actually was a buddy of mine that I worked with at Dolphin Island Sea Lab. He had retired, moved on to Perdido Key, and he's terrified. He's a seagrass guy, terrified of snakes, absolutely terrified. And he said, I was really weird. I went online to find out who can help me with my snake problem, and your name popped up. He goes, you're a snake guy? I said, it's a long story. It's a long story. But he called me over there, and I divided, it was a gated community. I divided his little community up into 10 walking grids, and I would do surveys at sunrise and sunset. My question I'm trying to answer is, where are the cottonmouths? How frequently do I encounter them, and where am I encountering them? So I can turn around and tell all right, this is where they're hanging out. So here are some things we can do to try to reduce this problem. I was encountering cottonmouths about 77% of the time I went out. They were there. They were all over, and the people there were terrified. But I also figured out most of them were in grid 4 and 5. So this is where we need to kind of focus. And so that ended up becoming a 3-year study before it was over with, and ended up getting that kind of published. But all those little things, add up to help build this program that is not a Sea Grant program that I do.
I have to ask very selfishly, because I'm interested, but Seahorse Key had an incident a while back where all the snakes died? What I remember, I don't know about that. What I do remember is what they had determined there was the snakes, which can easily swim through salt water. I've seen rattlesnakes swim across the intercoastal here. Getting to the island's not a problem. Once they're there, can they find fresh water and food? And what they found the snakes were doing there is they were moving to the west end of the island underneath the bird rookeries. And so food or chicks were falling, and this was their source of food. And the drinking water, the leaves were holding water from the rainwater events, and so they were drinking that. The question was, all right, when the birds leave and the rookery is not active, what are the snakes doing now? And so a lot of the research was showing they basically went into survival mode. They were moving around. They would find fish kills on the beach. They actually saw some of them gnaw anything that smelt like fish, which is a favorite food of the cottonmouth. Seagrass. They saw one gnawing on a stick one time, but it had the odor of a fish. And snakes eating snakes. Cottonmouths will eat cottonmouths. So they kind of went into survival mode until the birds came back. The question I heard later was the birds stopped coming there. They're now going to another island. So everybody's like, okay, what are the snakes going to do now? And that kind of mimicked or mirrored what I was doing on Perdido Key, because unlike the island we're on right now, we have cottonmouths here, but over there, they're all over the place. Like, why are there so many here? What are they feeding on? What is their food source? That kind of thing. But what the public wanted to know, how do I keep them off my back deck? That was really where the focus was, how can I be safe and not get bit by it when I go to work, kind of thing. Were you able to turn some snake haters into some snake lovers?
Yes. And all the way through that program, that has been a positive thing. I've gotten so many people have come back. Like, it was really strange too, because some folks would come to the program absolutely terrified. I usually brought a live snake with me. And I would tell them right up there, I would have it in a box up here with a towel over it. And before I would start, I said, I'm just going to let everybody know, because I do know there are people who are terrified of that animal, and it's not a joke. You don't mess around with this. So I said, I've got a live snake in that box. And like a third of the people would go stand against the back wall, which was interesting to me. Like, you came to the show, but they didn't know there was going to be a live snake. But before it was over with, they were coming up. They wanted to see it. Some of them wanted to touch it or hold it. Others didn't want, but they would get closer. And then I've gotten a lot of responses from the public over the years, especially from master gardeners. I talked to a lot of master gardener groups. Like, you have kind of calmed our fear. I'm not in love with them, but I'm not afraid of them anymore. And that's a success story for me. Yeah.
Where so much of your job is doing public programming, and you're doing some publishing too, but how do you measure the impact of what you do?
Impacts, yeah, that's a good question. What we do is what we call outcomes and impacts. So every year we're going to be teaching programs. We report how many programs we did, how many attended the programs, and then what kind of feedback. Did they learn anything? But then you take the next step, what we call the so what question. The famous at UF, so what? You did all this, what does that mean? So then you have to track that down over time. And so that's kind of where you turn programming like snakes, which is nice and it's cute, but what are the real problems? This is a problem. I'm not blowing it off. People are very, especially again, it's a Navy town. This is a very deep concern. And just to back that up, I'll write an article about water quality, and I might get 200 or 300 views. I'll write one about snakes. I remember I wrote one about snakes. I had 19,000 views within 4 hours. There is something about that animal. I love it. I hate it. You know, whatever it is. They may not even care about what you wrote about. I actually thought about one time posting on our social media or our website, snakes, just the title, no article, and just see what happens. 80,000 views. Like, I didn't write anything. But you come back to your question with impacts. Where do these real serious issues like water quality and things like that? That's where you try to make impacts. Folks, it affects businesses, it affects real estate, property things. Here in town, the issues, water quality is a big one. That's a big one around here. So I do work on water quality. My background is more wildlife, and I'll be honest with you, what's happened along with the terrapin thing blowing up, here locally, we had a lionfish issue. When I first got hired, the first lionfish was found here in 2010. And shortly after that, Dr. Will Patterson had determined that the densities of lionfish off this beach right here were the highest in the South Atlantic region. We had a real problem here. And the public was, especially the divers and the fishermen, were very upset about it. Very upset about it. We got to do something. We got to do something. So I said, okay. So I worked with the county. Our county has a Division of Marine Resources. And so I worked with him. Robert Turpin's the guy who runs that. So Robert and I kind of worked together and put together a plan on how to educate the folks about it, what they were up against, and best methods of how to manage that problem. And that took over my life, just like terrapins. Lionfish became a big thing, and all of a sudden now it was other invasive species, and so that has become a big thing. And we have made some impacts. We have NGOs that have been formed to help deal with the problem. We started 2 or 3 different major tournaments. One of them, I mean, again, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars of awards and prizes. Had they made a dent to it, we bring a lot of lionfish in. As I told you, they reproduce like crazy. So we have got impacts there. And the impacts has probably mostly been, an effort to manage and get rid of this fish. Has it made a difference in the numbers out there? Yes. Actually, Dr. Patterson has followed up with that and said the densities are lower. They're still high, but they're much lower. There has been an impact there. So that is an example of how an impact can be made. So I've done a lot in Beach Vitex, the plant you guys were working with today. That was a plant that was not even on the radar in the state of Florida. It was found first here on Pensacola Beach, and we know of 2 records in Jacksonville. We had communications with South Carolina, where it is a huge issue up there. They called me actually first and said, hey man, if you got it on your beach, you need to get rid of that now. You're going to have a real problem on your hands. So we jumped on it. We've been all over that. We managed to get the plant identified as an invasive species in Florida, and it now is listed as a state noxious weed. So we're moving in the direction. We are now, as I was sharing earlier, we think we're on top of it. We might even be able to eradicate this from Florida, and then you turn around like, oh no, there's another one. So, we just keep hacking at it. So the invasive species has had an impact. And I've gotten a lot of traction there. The terrapin thing more. I mean, that's an animal that doesn't get a lot of attention, but the citizen science has gone beyond Pensacola. That project now starts in Baldwin County, Alabama, and goes all the way to Wakulla. So I'm having to train people in every one of these counties. That's like 8, 9 counties that I do. So the impact has been the awareness and the spread of the issue. Now, FWC is paying attention a little bit more to the animal as far as possibly listing it. I don't know if it's going to go that far, but they're watching what's happening with that animal in the state, and our data is helping with that. So we are making an impact there. And, again, that's kind of how it works.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Sure.
You're in a unique position as somebody who is native to this area, coming into this position where you're then told, well, just pay attention for a little bit and see what the issues are. Can you talk a little bit about what you saw as some of the pressing issues environmentally and ecologically here in Pensacola and Escambia County, and as well what you learned more as you got on the job?
Yeah. I would say the number one, which when I do an assessment every October to see where the community and my advisory committee, where their brain is. Water quality is always in the top 3, if not number 1. When I was growing up, it was a big issue. This is an old community. This town's been here for a long time. There were things being done. We were talking earlier about, the number of Superfund sites. We got them all over the place. But again, you got to remember in those days and times what they were doing. They didn't realize what they were doing was wrong. Now we know. So there were a lot of environmental issues, especially in the 60s and 70s. Escambia Bay was listed as one of the 10 most polluted bays in the United States when I was in high school. I do remember people would go down to Escambia Bay. We had those old metal trash cans that you don't see anymore. You could fill up a trash can with blue crabs probably in 30 minutes, and now you can't find them. The seagrass all declined. Scallops, that's another project I'm working on, which I hope to get an impact. We hope to get scallops back in our bay. When I was a kid, they were here, and then they just literally disappeared. And people ask the question, what happened? What's going on? Well, the habitat's been degraded, the water quality went down, and we overharvested. I'm not going to lie, we took too many. So combine all that, it collapsed. So that happened. The scallops disappeared, the horseshoe crabs disappeared, the blue crabs seem to be disappearing. We had fish kills on the local bayous. Now, in our waterways here, Pensacola Bay it's a bay system. So there's actually one bay, but there's like fingers of it, and each finger's got its own little name, Escambia Bay, East Bay, that kind of thing. But it's all one system, and feeding that system is a series of what we call bayous. And those bayous have had a lot of problems. Fish kills. When I was in high school, I would say at least once a month, Bayou Tahar was completely covered with dead fish. That's all you could see was dead fish. And the odor was horrible. It would wash up on shore. The city would come rake them up, put them in a pickup truck, and go somewhere. I don't know where. Probably Alberta, Alabama. I don't know where they went with them, but we had to get them out of here. And so I remember that. I remember we had a septic tank when I was growing up, and my dad did his own maintenance on the septic tank, and I remember these little red worms that were always in the septic tank. And I learned to swim at Bayou Tahar. And one day we went down there and I saw those little red worms swimming in the bayou, and I told her, I know what that is. I've seen these before. I mean, we got human waste in our water here. So that has always been a big issue. And when it came time to get my advisory together and say, all right, what are the pressing issues? I already knew what you were going to say, water quality. We were going to address this thing. It's a tough one to handle. It really is. I mean, everybody knows what the problem is. They don't necessarily want to do the things we ask them to do to make it better. They want someone else to do it. And so that's been a very tough program. I keep working at it. We keep whacking and hacking at it, but we haven't had a lot of big impacts on it, other than awareness. So
it seems to me that your position would be very challenging because you have to be very diplomatic, where you maybe scientifically can say, okay, well, cause and effect, we know this, if this happens in these certain scenarios, and maybe we're seeing them, but there are so many different people factors, social factors, industry, military, all kinds of things going into the calculus there.
Yeah.
How do you...
It's very hard for me because I'm from here. Most of the extension agents around the state are not from the community where they're working for. So people see them as a representative of the University of Florida. That's supposed to be my role. I'm sitting here goes, oh, that's Rick. And so I've had a very hard time doing exactly what you just said. But I do play the middle of the road. I do. And I've always done that. I mean, as a school teacher, I had that. I mean, a lot of you guys, students had always wanted to know, well, what is your feeling on this issue? Because I'm getting ready to ask you an exam question about that. I went, no. I want to hear what you have to say. So I would never tell them. I wouldn't get on either side of the fence. I had a lot of practice doing that as a high school teacher. So when I got this job, I was ready to do it. But like you said, being a member of this community, they kind of Rick, well, we know what you think. Let's move on. Well, no, hold on. Hold on. So, it's a lot easier and better now than when I first started. I had to break that ice a little bit. But yeah, you cannot be even viewed as being on one side of a contentious issue. And Sea Grants, we do something with Sea Grant they call Sea Grant Academy. And they talked a lot about that at Sea Grant Academy. Your job is to provide science-based information and let them make the decisions. You cannot even appear to be, I'm on this side of a red snapper issue or whatever it might be. So you have to, and like I said, being from the community, it's very hard, but you have to play, like you said, the devil's advocate and play the middle of the line. Like, I'm here to provide information. You guys choose to do what you want to do.
I hate to ask this, but I can't help it.
Sure.
Can you tell us about a time where that proved to be especially difficult to you, or where you felt conflicted?
Everybody here thinks I'm an environmentalist. And so when you're working with industries that are not heavy on that side of it, they don't look at Sea Grant the way they're supposed to look at Sea Grant. So it's still that way. I meet every third month. The marina industry meets here, all the marina owners, and I'm part of that. That we all get along great. But it's kind of like they're sitting here talking, and they said, oh man, they're talking about manatees, more manatees in the bay, and oh, that's going to be an issue for boating. Sorry, Rick, we love manatees, but, you know, and so they already have taken the point that I want to protect the manatees. What do you do? But you know what I'm saying? They've already judged me. They already know. We know where Sea Grant stands, and that's a hard thing because they're looking at it because they know me, and they're assuming that what I'm thinking is what Sea Grant's thinking, and I got to work really hard. So that's an example of an industry that every time the Rice's whale popped up, they're not happy about that at all. And they looked, oh man, we love whales. And I said, I know, I like whales too. But I understand their side. I really do. I understand exactly where they're coming from. And I think they're starting to figure that out, that yes, we're here to talk and how to make this thing work for you guys. So.
And so you're referring to the discovery of the Rice's whale in the Gulf.
Right. And that really spooked the boating industry pretty bad. You know, what kind of new rules and regulations are going to come down because of that animal that lives offshore here. So, yeah.
I do want to pivot a second and ask you a little bit more about the Superfund sites here in Escambia County and some of the unique challenges that they pose.
Yes. We started, this was the mid-1990s. This is when we had that Marine program going at the high school. The county decided to form an organization they called the Bay Area Resource Council, BARC. The Bay Area Resource Council. And the purpose of that is that all around the Bay Area, we have the University of West Florida, we have the EPA lab right down the street here, DEP's got an office in town. Everybody's out doing things, but no one's talking to each other. In some cases, we're doing the same project and we don't even know we're doing the same project. So the purpose of BARC was to get everybody in a room and find out what's everybody doing and can we pool our resources and go, instead of competing for grants, we can all go together as an organization. And we were invited. They invited the Marine program from the high school to come in. It was just me and the other teacher that went. The students didn't go, but we sat in and they were discussing that issue about some of the water quality problems of Superfund sites around the military base. They dug into the sediment. What the bottom line, one of the presentations was which bayou is the most polluted. And that's exactly how they titled the talk. And one of them was, well, if you look at the sites that had the most toxic triggers, indicators, it was Bayou Chico, but the most toxic one was in Bayou Tahar. You know, so how are you going to ask the question? And they were talking about that primarily in the water column. If you take samples of the water, you didn't see a lot of problems. It's when you started digging into the mud and the sediment from years of heavy metals and things being dumped in and around the Navy base. You know, and what they decided is it's probably best just to leave it alone. If we try to take that out and do something, we're stirring it back up in the water column. It'll be absorbed by the plankton, and we're just making a bad. DDT is still out there. I mean, I remember as a kid riding on my bike behind the DDT truck. It made this gigantic fog, and as a kid, we all thought that was great. We'd get on our bikes and just ride around it for, you know, I guess I'm fine. I don't know. But yeah, the DDT was a big thing around here. So, yeah, we knew about the Superfund sites. We know where they are. There's 5. The cost of trying to mitigate those things was insane. And of course, EPA had to deal with Superfunds all over the country. You know, here locally, there was sort of an outcry, clean it up, but they said, we've got only so much dollars, we can do this much, but we can't do the full Monty, if you will, kind of thing. And some folks were upset about that, very upset. Other folks, like, it is what it is. And other folks, there's nothing to a Superfund side, that's all made up. You know, we had that audience out there too, so. But yeah, they're here, there's issues, there's problems, and most of it's in the sediment.
When did you learn about the toxicity posed by the Superfund sites?
I I had known about it before that meeting. I learned a lot at that meeting. I learned a lot about it at that meeting. Creosote was a big issue. We had Bio Chico, which I talked about having a lot of sites, was an industrial site. It was, I know you don't know the geography of town, but just outside of downtown is Bio Chico. And that was back in the day, in the 1880s, 1890s, you had downtown, and Bio Chico was way out of town. You know, it was over there, half a mile over there. But that's what the industrial sites is where that was. And they did have creosote there, where they would soak the wood, because there were wooden ships. The NAS Pensacola, when it first opened up, it was right after this became a state, actually. The U.S. Navy had their eyes on this bay because it's a very deep water bay, and they wanted to build a shipbuilding facility here, a Navy yard. And so those ships were wooden. So the docks, the shipbuilders, all of that, they would soak it in this chemical creosote that kept organisms from eating the wood, decaying the wood. And back then, I don't know this, I've seen pictures, old historic photos of big vats of this stuff, and I think they would just dump it. I mean, a lot of times, not necessarily in the water, but maybe they did, because that mindset, I mean, I'm talking about my grandparents and great-grandparents, the solution to pollution is dilution. You know, dump it in the bay, the tide will take it out, and we don't have to worry about it anymore. So, there's a lot of creosote over there. Matter of fact, we were talking about some of these stories earlier. The fishermen, even today, I don't know as many, but when I was growing up as a kid, the folks that were fishing over there, they would catch fish out of Chico. The first thing you do was you would break it and smell it. If it smelled like turpentine, you threw it back. If it didn't, you put it in a cooler. Yeah, I was like, wow. So I had a sailboat over there. Nothing grew on the bottom. You put the sailboat anywhere else, you're scraping barnacles at least once a month. Nothing grew on the bottom. Things are getting better over there, I might add. Barnacles are now growing on your boat. Yay. People, I guess that's a good thing. It is a good thing, if you know what I'm talking about. But so yeah, it was a body of water. It's one of the oldest B-maps in the state of Florida. And it's got a lot of, and there's several Superfund sites sitting right around that. So you got the Navy base on one side, and then the creosote facility where they were dumping it is right there. So you got that all in the ground. It's all sitting in the ground. So, and matter of fact, recently they were removing a abandoned sailboat, and the vessel that was pulling the sailboat out bumped something on the bottom, and they saw something come up. They said it was creosote. We don't even know what it was on the bottom. We don't know if it was a box, a container, if it was a ship. We don't know what it was. But some creosote did come out. So even at the bottom today, there's still some stuff out there. It's bad. Yeah.
So this is the third field work trip we've taken to Pensacola for this project specifically to talk about Superfund sites. And a lot of the people that we've spoken to have had abnormal rates of health impacts in their communities. Can you talk about where you see that in the community?
We saw this, and again, when I got married, my wife grew up in East Hill. So you got downtown Pensacola, which is right on the waterfront. But the people lived in North Hill. You wanted to live on a hill above the water because of flooding, which is ironic because now everybody wants to be on the waterfront and screams about getting flooded. Like, well, what are you doing down there? So they would live on North Hill, and then they built a community called East Hill right after that. And so that's where my wife grew up, and Bio-Tahar feeds through there, and that's where I live today. I live there. That is area code 32503, and downtown is 32, and North Hill is 32501. There was a study put out, I want to say it was the University of South Florida, I can't remember, but I want to say it was them, put out a study that those two zip codes had some of the highest rates of cancer compared to the size of the population that they found in their study, which created a big hoopla here. Folks said something's got to be done. Others said that's bogus reporting, that's bad science. You know, they had that whole thing going on. But I do know that many of the people in our community ended up with cancer. I know a couple of the kids that went to school with my kids that have passed away from cancer, and then my daughter got cancer. I do remember going to the hospital, and I was shocked at how many children were in there and how many I knew. But whether there was never a connection, because they asked us, the type of cancer my daughter had was Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so they started asking us questions because they didn't know that much about it. I'm talking about the physicians now. And they were all part of this, they called it a POG. It was sort of a team of of oncologists from around the country that are trying to figure out how are kids getting this stuff and what can we do to turn it around. They asked us all kinds of things, like, have you ever gone on vacation? I was like, yes. Where? Like every vacation? What did you? I said, Atlanta. Only Atlanta? Is that the only place you've ever been? I went, no, I've been to a lot of places. You really want to know? But that's what they were doing, was trying to see if they could find some kind of pattern. And they never were able to link what was happening to the kids, because every cancer that I was telling you about was different. It wasn't the same. But there was a lot of, it wasn't just youth cancer either. But there, if you look at BioToHAR, the way it comes out, there's a turn right where 17th Avenue turns into Har. And I know this means nothing to you guys, but there's a turn right there, a sharp turn. There's sort of an elbow in the bayou right there. It's leaching out from a Superfund site on Fairfield Drive. There were two Superfund sites right next to each other. And at that meeting I was telling you about, they did go in. This is right there off of Palafox and Fairfield, if you're familiar with that area. There was a creosote facility, an agrochemical plant. I think there was a couple of things there. And it was down in the ground, and it was leaching through the groundwater and coming up in this spot in Tahar, close to where we lived. And so immediately everybody said, well, that's it, that's it, that's it. But again, they were never able to connect those two. They were never able to connect those two. So the hot spot's there. That's how people refer to it. And there are folks who have had cancer. And again, that study came out and said 32503 and 32501, there's a lot. Now, the other thing I'll throw in there, and this was brought up when they published that study, is that this is a Navy town. Everybody's from somewhere else. So just because people living there have cancer doesn't mean they, whatever it was that caused this, did they encounter it here or did they encounter it at the last base? So that was all, you got to throw that in there. It's hard to say, yes, you live here, but did you live here your whole life? My daughter did. She did live here her whole life. She's doing fine, by the way. She's doing great. She's doing great. So.
What was, I guess I should say, were there community networks as you all are going through treatment? And it sounds like the doctors are trying to find answers, and you're saying, wow, there are people I know here, and there are young people that I know here.
Afterwards, at the time, not really. I'll be honest with you. I remember going on the floor, and one of the ladies that worked at the cafeteria at my high school was there. And she goes, don't tell anybody I'm here. I said, okay. People didn't want everybody to know. They didn't want to know what was going on. I just happened to see them like, oh, wow, you're here. He goes, yeah. And they would kind of go on. So it didn't really happen there. But there was support for the kids, particularly, and that was throughout the state of Florida. They have this program where they all meet at Disney World. They do. They get a day at Disney, and so the kids all hear these things, and the parents go in another room because they got some things they want to talk to us about. You know, you need to keep on them because once she's done, she needs to be checked every year. And what we find is that kids who go through this, once they get out of college, they stop getting checked, and then when they're 35, all of a sudden it pops back up. So they've got to be checked. You've got, as much as they don't want to do it because they've been with doctors and get poked by needles all the time, they're sick of it. They don't want it, but you've got to keep. And my daughter's been very good about it. I will say there were some moments like, I'm done, I'm over this. Like, you can't be done. So afterwards, there was some support stuff that kept people connected. And a lot of the kids would come back and do camps for kids who were sick now. Those that were survivors. And then they had the, what did they call it? The Relay for Life. You know, that's a big thing here. And then, of course, we did make the Make-A-Wish situation as well. And, of course, my wife and I both donate to all of those now. You know, they helped us, and we're going to help the next group.
And again, I know we're talking about like correlation and causation that can't really be proven, or we can't refer to it in that way. But are those rates still current?
I don't know. No one's talked about it because there was such backlash from it. I will say backlash. There was it was contentious. A lot of people say it was bogus report. You're making the city look bad, blah, blah, blah. You know, who are these people? What are their conditionals? I mean, and so it just got quiet after that. No one really talked much more about it. So I haven't heard anything since, no. Now, it's kind of hard to say also whether or not, I would say, you know, we've got a lot of hospitals here for the Panhandle area. A lot of people that live in the Panhandle, this is where they come. So we've got a lot of cancer patients in this community, but they aren't necessarily from Pensacola. So again, if you look at how many cancer patients in Escambia County, it's going to be off the charts. But as far as 32501 and I haven't heard anything about that since. So I don't know.
One of the things that we've heard people kind of wrestle with, especially longtime Pensacolians, is, once you learn about the toxicity of the Superfund sites, there's this question of like, well, do you stay or do you go?
Right.
What does community mean and what is sense of place? What was that conversation or what was that thinking like for y'all?
We were not going to leave. And I don't think a lot of the folks I know that did move, obviously they're in military, so a lot of our friends were, and they go because they've been told they got to go. I don't know of anybody who packed up and left Pensacola because of that. I do get calls at the extension office because of the Navy people moving. I got one not too long ago from Virginia. Like, look, I'm thinking about buying a house on Bayou Tahar. Would you? We get those because they've heard what's going on. And that's another reason I think that there might be some quieting of the issue because word gets around that this is going on. Well, now people don't want to come to Pensacola. And so, the folks that are trying to attract folks to Pensacola, like, we don't want to talk about that. So that may be another reason. You don't hear much more about it. But I do know the word has been out, and then people have called and they're concerned a little bit about, do I want to move there? And if I do move there, where would you live? Where would you pick? And you goes back to your question, like, I can't really tell you that. I can tell you that I live by it and I'm fine. My daughter's sick, but I'm okay. I don't know. I mean, you just got to give them as much facts as you can and let it go and let them make that call. But there are people that are worried about it. So.
Are you okay if we keep going for a few more minutes?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, thanks. I want to open it up. I've been hogging the microphone. Do y'all have some questions for Rick?
All right. Hi, I'm Ryan Tenner.
Hi, Rick.
I have a couple questions for you. You touched on earlier about, sorry about that, wildlife and being very prolific when you're growing up. You also touched on like suburbanization and the increasing development of Pensacola. Can you talk about like how that development has impacted the wildlife and the environment and the ecology of the area?
Yeah, we were very lucky here. As we build, as you guys know, because you're all from Florida or other parts of Florida, as they build, we lose habitat. And if you go back and look at wildlife, the organisms whose populations are struggling or have been put on the threatened or endangered list, there's a variety of reasons why, but habitat loss is always at the top. It's one of the top three. And so as we grow and build and put things up, all the building that's going on out here, that impacts all of them. The beach mice, even the snakes, even if you don't like them, it does impact them in a negative kind of way. We're lucky here on Pensacola Beach, though, and I was alive, I was in middle school when it happened, they decided to make part of the island a national park. That was not popular with everybody. I mean, they saw dollars and they wanted to build, and there was a huge fight. There was a huge fight over it. The national park side won. 50% of our island now does belong to the national seashore. And what's been interesting, as I was sharing earlier, is the people who were involved on the other side of that issue when it was happening are so happy they lost. So we at least have that to try to help and protect, what plants and animals that are around can still be here. But for the other parts, when you get into town and the growth and the development that's happening over there, and it's happening all over Florida, we're not alone. Folks are getting kind of nervous and upset about it. A lot of animals are disappearing. I mean, and not always. I've just heard from ladies who told me, like, I had birds that were outside my window and I hardly see birds anymore. There is kind of a swing, and you guys might know, maybe in your communities or whatever dealings you may have with UF-IFAS, people are getting into pollinator gardens. I mean, folks are doing things to try to get organisms back, but it's real interesting. We have a front yard kind of like that, and so the pollinators find us. The lady across the street is planting hers, but she doesn't get any butterflies, but she sprays. And she keeps coming over like, why? So we still got a lot of education to do. So there's a lot of that, and I'm sure in your communities too. I mean, lawn care, nothing against the industry or any of that kind of stuff, but they spray a lot of poisons when they're out there, and that hampers the food base for the organisms, the birds that would be coming in. We have this thing we call, and it's not we, Extension does it, but they call it Leave the Leaves and No Mow March. You've heard of that kind of thing? I don't know about in your communities. Some folks get upset about, dude, rake your yard. Like, no, actually it's benefiting the animals. So it's kind of turning around. People are starting to catch on to that and start doing it more. But all that growth, all that development has totally altered the environment to the point where the organisms just can't stay, as I said with the scallops. And that's another thing we've been working on the last couple of years. Everybody would love to see scallops come back here. We're like, well, it's kind of like when we were working on seagrass. There was a gentleman from Texas A&M who said it very well. He goes, you need to figure out why the seagrass died in the first place. Because if you go out here and plant it and you haven't fixed the problem, it's like putting trees up in the middle of a forest fire. And so we're in the same place with the scallops. Will the scallops survive? Are they going to make it? So up to this point, we've been doing a lot of projects to try to answer that question. We think the answer is yes. And with that, going back to your question, we have seen some heavy impacts, but people now have noticed the change and the decline, and they are doing things to try to bring it back. And for the most part, most of the community is on board with it.
That's great. Can you tell me, like, in just your opinion, how do you think we can get more people to do those sorts of things, like, you know, the not mowing their lawns or things like that? Like, how do we get
That's
that
a
more,
good question.
you know, accessible?
It is. It's a very good question. What I have found works best is that if you have a Florida-friendly yard, you may have seen that website, you know, when people first hear about that, their immediate thought is it's going to be a jungle, it's going to be a mess. But if somebody does it and they do it right, and they're following the principles that, you know, IFAS gives them, then you see the yard like, that's cool. And then they'll go do theirs. We have the same problem with living shorelines. People are like, oh man, I don't want to put grass in front of they're on the waterfront. They want it, you know, St. Augustine all the way down to the water. And then they complain about the erosion, like, well, you know, this is how this works. And they're like, oh, I don't want grass out there. I can't get to the water and it'll attract snakes and blah, blah, blah. And then you go and you put a living shoreline at the neighbor's house and he looks at it, he goes, that's cool. And so I'm finding that is more than me going and showing them all these really cool pictures on his PowerPoint, is for them to go out. So we do trips where we take them like, here's a living shoreline. And they're like, oh, okay, I can handle that. I can do that. So I think that's had a bigger impact than anything else we've done.
That's really cool. And then my last question, what do you think is the importance of the work that you do and what you study, you know, relating to the community that you live in?
I find my work very, very rewarding because I'll be quite honest with you, I'm surprised at how much the public doesn't know. And then you're thinking, well, they know what to do, they're just not doing it. And then you get in and start having conversations when they're like, they don't know what to do. You know, and you thought they did. And so then you educate them like, okay, I get it. And I find that is very important because we are assuming people know things that they don't. And I think Extension can help out. Again, a lot of times it's really hard because the way we're set up, the way it should work, is that the community's got a problem, they ask us for a solution to solve it. Our thing, you may have heard, is IFAS Extension, Solutions for Your Life. So yeah, we're going to provide the solution for you. But what I'm finding out now is they don't even know what questions to ask. So sometimes you have to do a program to kind of put it in their face a little bit and say, here is the issue. Like, oh, that's how that works. And then you can start doing, because I will say a lot of things are turning around. When I first got this job, they did not want to talk about climate change. They did not want to talk about sea level rise. That's a voodoo. We don't talk about that. But now the impacts of the hurricanes, we all are feeling it all over the state. There are more coming in. The flooding in this town is crazy. And people are starting to pay attention, and now they're asking questions where we can step in and say, all right, here's what the science is saying. I will still say that that's been a hard one. I wrote a whole series on climate last year, and it was the lowest read articles I did. But after watching what happened in Los Angeles this year with those fires, like, dude, I got to write again. I don't care. I'm going to put it out there again and see if anybody bites. And then we had 8 inches of snow this year. Like, okay, that's not normal. We don't normally get that, all right? So, you know, those kinds of things are starting to make people pay attention. And then the doors open and we can make some moves in the right direction. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Hi, this is Isabella Castro.
Hello.
So you might have gone into this a little bit, but you mentioned your mentors like Don Scott, Mr. Hunt, and kind of working with citizens through the citizen science projects. I kind of wanted to ask you how over the years you have served as a mentor and how you see that role as being important.
Well, I'm mentoring the new Sea Grant agent in Santa Rosa County right now. Yeah, so I'm enjoying it and he's enjoying it, and my job is not to let him get caught up in this calendar thing. That's step number one. Thomas, don't say yes to everything. So, yeah, As far as a mentor, again, I'm obviously mentoring him. I'm going to fall back on my students that I taught in that marine science program. Even a lot of them didn't go into marine science. Some of them did, have got PhDs now. A lot of them didn't. They still live in the community. And I get a lot of attaboys and accolades from them. That they really enjoyed it, even though they didn't go into marine science. It was one of their favorite classes. I didn't want to go to school. I came to school for your class. When I hear that kind of stuff, I feel good. So I think I made a difference in their lives. Actually, even for those kids that didn't go into science, what I feel good about is that I showed them how the science process works. So that, remember when we had COVID and people were talking about trials and how quickly do we get these things, and they all knew and they understood how the process works. You can't just come up with a real quick fix. And so I feel good about that they probably got a really good science education and at the very least understand how the science process works. And so they understand what it's going to take to solve a problem like the pandemic. It's not going to be an easy one. So I guess I mentored them. I don't know if that's the word. I taught them. I don't know. But that's a group that makes me feel good when I hear from them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, my name is Sofia Izquierdo. And I had a question about, you mentioned how the water quality in Pensacola has always been a huge issue, as well as habitat loss for species and, the lasting presence of Superfund sites, and as well as the fact that people are very reluctant to talk about climate change. Yeah. And I know especially for the younger generation, it tends to feel like a place of hopelessness. What is your advice as someone with years of experience, in environmental conservation and research for people who have that feeling?
Okay, two things on that. One, I've had that feeling myself. I mean, I grew up watching, I grew up, when I was in middle school, they created the EPA and had Earth Day, the first Earth Day, and I saw all that stuff happen. And some folks from my generation will remember Chief Iron Eyes Cody, the Indian. I will never forget seeing that commercial. That was such an impactful commercial. We watched it. I remember oh man, we made the Indians cry. We got to do something about this. I mean, so I watched all of that. And I saw the massive movement to start. We had the international coastal cleanups. All these things started at that time. The thing that kind of got me down, and I became one of those folks, is nothing has changed. I have gone down the road and watched people throw stuff out their window. Like, dude, and I have people, nothing against it. I've had my advisor, Rick, we need to talk to the youth about pollution and litter. So that, I said, we've been talking about this for 50 years and nothing seems to be changing. So I kind of got into that same groove. But then you see the folks come out. We are making differences. And I've actually submitted and it was approved. I'm going to give a talk at our EPAF conference next month on persistence. I was about to give up on the Scallop project. We do something called the Scallop Search. We take volunteers, they swim a 50-meter transect line looking for bay scallops. We started in 2015, 000. We have 55 grids in Santa Rosa Sound and 11 over in Big Lagoon. And we send people, I have University of Southern Mississippi's marine biology class comes over and does it. We have people coming from all over to do this thing, 000. And at one point I'm going how long do you keep going? I mean, we already know the answer is 0. I might as well be looking for the Loch Ness Monster. We found 183 last year. And the town is excited. Now, I don't know what we're going to find this year, but my point with that is I could have quit. I could have thrown in the hat. And so, yeah, you've got to stick with it. Good things are going to happen. Eventually, people will come around. Kind of as I said earlier, if I can convince a few yards to go Florida friendly, then we'll start seeing others. You just got to stick with it. So, it's hard. It really is. I got down myself, as I said. You're thinking throw in the hat. This is pointless. We don't need to do this anymore. We're losing. And then one day it works out. So don't quit. Don't quit.
Thank you for that. And I have one more question. What is the most rewarding part about working for Sea Grant?
Helping people. That's the quick answer. I love helping people. And when I hear folks say, thanks, Sea Grant, for something, that makes me feel good. It really does. So I love helping people.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, this is Carissa Putter. I think I might have two questions for you. The first one is more about your time in the public school system. Mm-hmm. Is there anything you feel like you learned from your students?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, all the time.
Any examples?
And I miss that part. Oh, God, I don't know. Some of it was just how much fun it was. We had one student, just as kind of a side thing, we were talking about learning. I'll quickly answer one of your questions. Language. The English language changes with generations. And so I had to learn the English. I remember coming in one time, this predates you guys, and they said, oh, Mr. O'Connor, or they called me Mr. O. Mr. O, that guy really dogged him. Like, oh, what the heck does that mean? I don't know. I came from another. I miss that, because now I'm out of that field. I don't know what the language is. Bro, I'm hearing this word all over the place. And okay, bro, is that a cool thing, a bad thing? Is that a good, bad thing? So yeah, I learned a lot about the English language for them. That was fun. But also the fun of learning I miss with them, because they would come in and I say, are there any questions? I remember we had this one guy, I can't remember his name right now, but he would always raise his hand. He had to go home and practice, like, what's the world's biggest pine cone? Just something like that. It had nothing to do, and it was just fun. But we would end up in discussions about things, and they knew a lot more. And I will say another place, going back to the public school, but I teach the Florida Master Naturalist program, and these are all adults. And I'm finding out very quickly. I mean, one of the things we've learned now is we go through, introduce yourself, and they'll say, I got a PhD in physics. Like, okay, I didn't know that. But I'm learning all kinds of stuff. I don't know a lot about birds, and I've got birders in there. So they're teaching me all kinds. I'm the teacher, they're the student, and they're teaching me. And I did get some of that from the high school kids. I did. I learned a lot because, again, a lot of them are fishermen. You asked that earlier. They spend more time on the water fishing than I did. And so, yeah, I'm a lifelong learner. I'm definitely a lifelong learner.
I love that. And I guess going more on being a lifelong learner and kind of like a relationship with the environment, because a lot of the memories you talked about, like being a kid, you seem to have a lot of connection with the land and the natural space. How do you think maybe encouraging people to connect more with that, like, relationship with the community, like how they connect with the environment can help maybe with...
That's, we were talking about that earlier. I don't know with who, but we have one program here called Panhandle Outdoors. Mm-hmm. And what that program is about is just what you're saying. There are people who live in this community. There are people that live in Pensacola that have never been across the bridge you drove across today. No kidding. They have never been over here. They don't even know what's on Pensacola Beach, never been there. They don't know about all the paddling opportunities. They don't know about the sailing opportunities. They don't know about the salt marshes and the hikes. So the Panhandle Outdoors program, we take them out there. We take them snorkeling on the reef that I showed you earlier today. Like, did you know this was here? And so is that thing you always hear, you protect what you love. I don't remember how it all works, love only what you live, that thing. But that's the idea. If you really want to engage, and that's where the citizen science has been one of my stronger programs, because they're out here looking for horseshoe crabs. They may not see horseshoe crabs, but they saw white pelicans, or they see things. They just see, I saw an owl attack a great blue heron. And they thought that was the greatest thing, forget the horseshoe crab, So to get them out here in the field doing stuff, that's when they're going to see things, start falling in love with it, and then they know they can protect it. Because if they don't know about it, if all they do is sit inside, this place means nothing to them. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Since we have a panel of 4 experts here, what is some of the current language or some terms that you can introduce Rick to?
Yeah. Let me ask, bro is just a general word for anybody, is that right? I'm hearing that word a lot.
It's a term of...
Sorry, I'm an old man. I don't know all these things. That's pretty general. It's not a bad thing. Bro's a good thing.
Oh, no, it's good.
It's a good thing.
Good.
Okay.
Pretty neutral.
Yeah, pretty neutral. Yeah. So you probably don't even know the words that are unusual to me. I got words that are unusual to you, though.
Huh? There's some unusual to us now.
Yeah, see here, yeah, I know. You speak to middle school kids, and they're talking a different language than you.
Yeah.
I mean, yesterday we were saying crashing out, which is like something that gets you very passionate about a subject, and you just have like a burst out about something that you don't like. For example, somebody was talking about how somebody was wearing evening gloves in the daytime, so they had a whole crash out about that. So you have that term?
Yeah, I know. That's the first time I've ever heard that.
It can be out of anger,
Thank you.
stress, just strong emotion. It has to be
Okay.
strong emotion.
Okay.
We talked about baddie.
Baddie?
A woman that looks really good. So you have that one.
Oh, Now, I had heard that just only once, but I heard that recently. That threw my generation off. I don't even know what you're talking about, but Yeah, okay, it's a good thing.
Like anyone can be a baddie.
Okay, anyone can be a baddie. Okay.
I think to go back to bro, bro can also be like if you're angry at someone. This
Okay.
might be a Miami thing. That's where I'm from.
Okay.
If you're driving and someone cuts you off, you're gonna go, bro, really?
Okay.
So it can be like good or bad.
Okay. But when you say bro, really, he's not your friend. You're not saying, hey, buddy, friend. Okay.
It could be.
You're
but
saying,
probably-
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bruh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been,
bra is another one.
Yeah, I've heard that. Well, see, one of the reasons I've heard it a couple times, my grandson's saying it all the time now. I'm going like, I don't know what you're talking about. Okay. So, yeah, I got to get back in high school so I can learn the language again. I don't know it anymore.
Thanks, y'all. I really just have one last question. Thanks so much for being so generous with
Sure,
us today.
yeah.
And it's something that we've posed to everyone, and that is, what does justice look like for you?
What does justice look like for me? Why I pause is I've seen so many cases in my lifetime, and I'll be honest with you, I'm seeing some things that were going on when I was young, particularly with the civil rights movement, that are circling back. And you think, back then that was a big word, a strong word, that people deserve justice for things that were done wrong. And there was so much injustice going on at the time. That during the 70s and 80s, it seemed like it was turning around, and it seems to be coming back. My initial thought with justice is that all the parties involved realized that a wrong was done, and we're going to make it right. And that this person is going to get a fair share, that what was done was incorrect. That's what I think of justice, is correcting wrong things being done to people or communities that, whatever the situation may be. It goes back to her comment, though. It's really disheartening when I look around now and see some of the same injustices being done. And you were talking about learning from students and things. One of my son-in-laws is African American, and I've learned a lot from him. He will tell me when he is welcomed and when he's not. And I can't pick that up. We'll walk someplace, he goes, this is not a good place for me to be. And he will explain to me what's going on, and I'll realize that, so coming from his world, he picks up on this very quickly. Coming from our world, we don't. And going back to your question, I just feel a lot of these injustices are still there. I wish that did not happen. He said he can be standing at the checkout at Walmart, and if there's a lady behind him, she immediately grabs her purse. That's the first, he goes, I see it, and I start watching when I'm with him, and it happens. I'm just like, that's wrong. Why is that the case? Why do you feel like this guy's getting ready to snatch your bag and go? So what I would see as justice is a world where that kind of thing doesn't happen, that everybody's treated equally, no matter who they are or where they came from. It doesn't matter. I'm just disheartened that it just doesn't seem to be happening. It's better than it's been, but it's not over. As you guys know, it's not over. There's still a lot of bad things going on out there. So hopefully, and it isn't always just the way people treat each other. Sometimes, you get into a legal situation or political situation. It really does depend on who your last name is. Some people are treated fairly. I know folks who are pulled over for a DUI. They're gone to prison or jail for 6 months. And other people have been pulled over. I know someone in town from a very prominent family has been pulled over multiple times and has never done one day. That's wrong. That's wrong. And so I'm hoping one day justice catches up with society. Everybody kind of has an idea what it is. It just isn't getting done. So I guess that answers the question. I don't know. Just everybody being fairly treated.
I
everybody.
think part B for the question would be, where does justice show up in your line of work?
In my line of work, we really put blinders on that. And what I mean by that is that everything I do, every program we offer is offered to everybody. I will say we have tried very hard to get some of the underserved communities to participate in our programs. Sea Grant and the beach is predominantly a white community. That's changed a lot. But I have somebody on my advisory, she's Filipino, her husband's Chinese. And I said, well, what can we do? What do they need? And her response to me, she went home and talked to him about it, and her response to me from him was that we don't feel welcome. They said they will walk into a room when they see primarily whites, they will turn around and leave. They want to come, but they don't want to engage. And we're trying to figure out how to break that. We're trying to figure out how to do that, because that's not how it is. But it's very difficult to get folks who are uncomfortable. And now I'm learning from my son-in-law now, when he steps in a room like, yeah, I shouldn't be here. He goes, no, you deserve to be here. We're going to do this. But I will say, as we put the programs together, we don't think of it that way. I mean, I'm offering this class, I'm going to do this citizen science thing, and everybody's welcome to come. Why are they not coming? We got to figure out that. We got to figure out how to make them comfortable. I've even offered, like, well, can I come to your group and work with your group? And I haven't been invited. So they're still uncomfortable. They're still uncomfortable. And I hope we get around that someday, somehow. Yeah, I do.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
Do you have any questions, Deborah? Okay. Well, is there anything else that you want to add before we stop recording that maybe we didn't think to ask you about that feels important?
No, I talked a lot. But I'm a teacher. I talk a lot, so.
Thank you for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Okay.
Yay!